Holy smokes. There we are. Hey, Shay.
Great. Hi, Joe.
First of all, I just want to take an opportunity to say thank you to a really good friend of mine, Shea Zwerver. We met, and she'll tell you, a number of years ago through an initiative in a prior employer that she was with. And so it's been a real joy to get to know her better, and also to understand from an advocacy perspective what really matters to Shea, and really just talk about. I think there's a lot in the media and in social media that talks about second chance employment and fair chance employment and everybody's employment. And then we couple that with, oh my gosh, we've got this workforce development gap and we don't have anybody to do the work, et cetera, and so forth. And, there seems to be a really great opportunity to kind of step up the conversation and walk through some of the things that people they're concerned about. When you talk about second chance employment, what does it really mean? As a business owner, am I allowed to participate? If I do participate, what does that mean from an accommodation perspective? What does it mean from a background check perspective? Oh my gosh, how do I deal with liability, et cetera, and so forth? So, in my work in a number of both statewide as well as national trade associations, this conversation is getting traction. And immediately many people go to, oh my gosh, what happens if it goes wrong? What do I do as an employer to not only protect my organization, but also my clients? So, but Shay, I'm going to put you on the spot, and you probably weren't ready for this, but that's okay because I know that you can pivot. So how did we meet? Do you remember that fateful day? How did we meet?
I do. And I know I was a little intimidated by you at first but then I, just because you were so knowledgeable and I'm excited to go in and have this conversation with the group of guys we were talking with that day. But we met so I was working at the Pennsylvania Department of Natural Resources and Conservation a little over a year ago. And when I was there, I started this vocational educational workforce development program that sought to get individuals who are incarcerated, into jobs, hopefully, or at least build awareness and engage them with career opportunities and career pathways in the natural resource conservation environmental sector. And, at the time, just to back up, is when we were recognizing this need within the natural resource conservation field to start to engage people and build a greater awareness of career pathways in that sector. I looked at, the needs of Department of Corrections, which is always, aiming to reduce recidivism. Department of Natural Resource Conservation was looking at how to build more workforce pipelines, specifically for the forest products industry and the tree care industry. And then also the administration at the time, Governor Wolf, had, one of his top priorities was jobs that pay. So tying in those three elements, I conceptualized and implemented this workforce development program that hoped to address all of those. And I remember after the first few cohorts, I sought to get feedback from the participants. So we collected qualitative feedback on, were there any topics that you want to learn about, anything we didn't touch on? And a lot of them mentioned they wanted to learn about entrepreneurship and small business basics. And that led, and I was, saying earlier, it's I wish I remember how we got connected, who was that individual that had mentioned your name, because I would be thanking them right now. But we got connected, and they, Joe Harford, he can talk about small business basics, entrepreneurship. So you and I connected. And then since then, you were coming back year after year to participate and teach that topic to these cohorts. And we still, kept getting their feedback. And I remember your class was one of the top rated classes. Everyone loved it. And for me, I think it was not just about the small business basics and entrepreneurship, but you have this quality. It was really motivational and inspirational when you came in and talked to the class. And I think that kind of population, really needs that, because we weren't there to enforce safety and policies. We were
Sure.
there as community members who wanted to have a conversation, who want to help encourage, empower these individuals. And so I think that allowed it, more natural conversation occurred, and they just,
Mhm.
I remember your classes were so great because they were able to get up. One of the exercises at one point was like sharing about a business solution, or what would be your, dream job. And they'd have to get up and kind of do public speaking and share, things that were really meaningful to them, or what would give them purpose. So
Right.
that's a
A trip down
longevity.
memory lane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. So we worked together over at SCI Rockview,
Mm-hmm.
and then we also worked over at SCI Huntington,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was.
Yes.
And one of the things that I just wanted to mention that is really important when you take a look at assessment and evaluation of programs, and I don't know that often happens, but you did a really great job of it, and that was going back, whether it's qualitative feedback or quantitative feedback, but getting feedback from participants to say, okay, what was helpful, what wasn't helpful, and oh, by the way, if you had a clean sheet of paper and you could do it all over again, like what would this thing look like? And that's really to your credit, because I think a lot of times when people are delivering programs, especially in your particular case where you develop the program, people kind of put blinders on and they're not necessarily worried about what people may have as feedback for them. But I think the fact that you're willing to do that speaks to, the way in which you look at quality service delivery.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about checking a box. It's about, okay, let's do this thing, but let's make sure it's really of high quality. Let's make sure that it gets value out of it, right? So I want to give you kudos for that. I think that the other thing that's important too is, and you and I have talked about this before, for those people that may not be aware, right now today, our DOC population is about, I think, 52 to 53,000. We know that this year, about 15 to 16,000 are going to get out of jail. And then on top of that, that the recidivism rate in Pennsylvania, I think, still kind of hovers around 55 to 56% of those individuals will be back in jail in 3 years from now, right?
It's actually,
and I think it's important. Go ahead.
No, I looked it up for this conversation, and the DOC, they had a 2022 recidivism report they had published, and the rate was, it was right around 64.7% within 3 years.
After 3 years.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's really unfortunate. And I think, part of the conversation has been, what are we doing differently since COVID, if anything? There was I think it's the Prison Policy Initiative just released a report not too long ago talking about, our prison population is spiking yet again, where it had not been in the past. And there's a number of different factors. And I don't want to necessarily get down that rabbit hole, but I think we have to be able to make sure that there's always a frame of reference of, okay, what is this Farming to Freedom thing with this big giant sunflower behind this goofy dude's head? And what is this woman talking about in regard to forestry services or whatever for inmates? And I think that, you got to begin it. Part of the foundational conversation is, what's the problem, right? So prison recidivism in Pennsylvania is a problem. Okay, we agree. I think the other thing is that, we talk about what are the two big obstacles that individuals, men and women, are faced by when they get out. Not having a job, a job, and number two, not having a safe, reliable, sustainable place to live. Those two things, when I did my prison research in Pennsylvania state prisons, that is a resounding, those two things are the ones that freak people out the most and cause the most amount of problems. So I think now when we start talking about second chance employment and fair chance employment, obviously it's about the employment side. It's not necessarily going to have a conversation about the housing side, but so I'm going to position myself. Okay, so I am a business owner today. I own a small company in Tyrone, Pennsylvania. I work in the technology space, and I have people that are in administration, people that are in sales, people that are in the warehouse, et cetera. So walk me through a conversation about, I get interested in this whole idea of like, Shea, talk to me about second chance, fair chance employment. Like, what does that mean to me as a Pennsylvania business owner? Why should I pay attention to it? And what does it mean to me?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll describe, what I think second chances, which you've touched on a lot, but we've also been using the words fair chance, second chance kind of interchangeably. And I do like the idea of fair chance better because second chance, right, implies that there was a first chance that was provided. And we know that some people may have never been given a first chance, unfortunately, due to just like historical discriminatory practices and policies that have been a part of our criminal legal system. But it, essentially refers to the practice of creating on-ramps and providing employment opportunities to individuals who have criminal records or convictions. And it's not just, business initiative. It's also about public safety and human welfare. But, I think some of the benefits that I would explain to you is, starting out maybe at the individual level, and then I'll zoom out. But, I'll start with the business, because you had asked, like, if, as a business owner, what would be the benefits to this? And it is a business solution and a talent strategy for addressing labor shortages. You mentioned that, there's a tight labor market right now for the workforce, and it delivers. So this talent strategy of tapping into this talent pool delivers a really highly engaged and loyal workforce who have often been, overlooked and stigmatized. And but Joe, like you mentioned, in PA, it hovers like around like 14 to 19,000. So maybe on average, like 15,000 individuals are released just from our state prison system annually. So that's a huge amount of people looking for employment. And, it's when we don't offer them job opportunities, it's a waste of human resources. And we're just perpetuating that cycle of incarceration. And like you said, employment is like the foundational component to giving people with criminal records or convictions a chance to rebuild their lives. And if we're not employing all of these people, we're really stalling, economic progress. So that's, some of the benefits, and too, we can get into other elements.
Let me play devil's advocate
Yeah.
and be that, because I've actually had this since Farming to Freedom. I've had similar comments made to me in pretty heated and aggressive ways, which is fine. So let me make sure I understand, Shea. So you're telling me that these people went to jail and they're criminals, and now they're coming out, and you're telling me that I should consider giving these people a job. These people got to stay in jail and they got to pay their dues. And, so why should I even listen to somebody like you? Why is this second chance mumbo jumbo thing even important?
Like I guess I just meant, it's hard because I'm so biased. Like I think it's like, it's a no brainer, and it's not just,
Right.
There's research out there that says it's not just, it's not just a nice thing to do. It is actually like a business solution. If you need workers, here are people looking for job opportunities, and, they're often overlooked, and they need to get involved and become a part, contributing back to society again and helping rebuild their lives. So it's not just that like a nice story or social thing. It actually is a talent strategy. But like kind of going off of that, I think, there are really like three main concerns employers have, and it's like safety and liability, their reputation, and the quality of the work they might see from these individuals. And it's like any other, and all this, but like any other business risk, you can adopt and implement operations, practices, policies that can help control and manage all of those concerns. And there's a nice article, or it's a report by the Legal Action Center that was put out in July of 2023. It's called Second Chance Employment, Addressing Concerns About Negligent Hiring Liability. And they did find that employers who conduct background criminal record checks, and evaluate the results when making, hiring decisions, they're rarely held liable. And then, there's some addressing that safety and liability. It's been, I think, overinflated. And it's nice that there is research out there by organizations that are helping educate people around, actually here's the real evidence.
Sure. So two things. If you wouldn't mind, just make a note to yourself as a follow-up, if you could send me the link to
Yes.
that, because when we get ready to circulate this through social media, we'll make sure that that's available to folks
Yeah.
that want to either take a look at the entire interview or just as a matter of, hey, here could be a starting point, because obviously people are going to have that concern. I think the other thing that, you point to, what's the evidence and what does research tell us, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that research tells us that men and women that were previously incarcerated have a less likelihood of calling off from work sick and not being really productive employees. We know that from an engagement perspective, the vast majority of those previously incarcerated are much more engaged than others that were not.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned it in your comment, which is there is a loyalty factor that in many cases we don't pay attention to. And often, again, people will give me pushback, and I would say, listen, I have been to prisons in Pennsylvania and Texas. I visited and worked with homeless people. And I got to tell you, nobody ever wakes up and says, you know what? I'm glad I'm in jail today. Like, this is a really great experience and it's a lot of fun. And I enjoy having people tell me what to do 24/7, 365. So now imagine that and this is exactly the feedback that I get from the men that I work with in the Huntington County Jail every week, which is like, listen, all I need is a shot, man, because I don't want to ever come back here. I don't want to be in this nasty outfit. I really want to change my life. I want to get a job. I want to get reunited with my kids, et cetera, and so forth. So now that's not to say that we're going to have 100% success, because we accept the fact that we will not. But there is still a reality. The employers that I've talked to, and there have been handfuls that have employed someone with a criminal record, have always had positive experiences.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, when I kind of barked at you in the very beginning from the perspective of, a non-believer, I think really what it comes down to, Shea, is it's about the data. And if still people want to ride the emotional train of, they got to stay in prison forever, and this is really hard. You know what? You're not going to change their mind anyway. They're kind of like, they're on the periphery. And so, if somebody's listening and somebody is really interested in, hey, you know what? I'd like to find out more. I would like to understand what's the pathway for my business to go ahead and become a fair chance employer in Pennsylvania. What are some of the things that they should consider doing?
Yeah. Happy to, give ideas for what companies can be doing if they want to engage in fair chance hiring. And there was something you'd mentioned, like, about the data. And I think, there is, and if companies or individuals do want to start doing this, like you said, like, there is research and evidence out there. And I can, I'll send you a list of the resources I have, to show, and it's a proof of concept of these individuals are more loyal, they can be more productive, they're more engaged. But I'd encourage companies to start tracking that on their own. So if they run criminal records and backgrounds, they can be aware of who those individuals are, and over time look at attendance, look at their promotional history, look at how they engage with trainings or how they're upskilling themselves from internal training offerings, and start to make the correlation on their own, like use their own data to provide that then to leadership, if the leadership's not already on board, which I do think is like very vital to any fair chance hiring like program, workforce development, is that leadership has to be on board. And like Joe, as a business owner, this, and then that's something, I currently work at Flagger Force, and I've really enjoyed about the company is that, the CEO and founder, Mike Donor, since the company's inception in 2002 has been, he cares about how people are going to show up today. So, okay, your past is your past, but like, are you going to come to work? Are you going to be on time? Are you going to be respectful? We can, if you show me you want to be here and, be a good worker, that's what he cares about. And so it's been really nice that's a part of the company culture. And you do see that, it's infiltrating into all of our field leadership then. So when they're out in the field and, maybe they're experiencing, if people are, gossiping or even giving other people a hard time, maybe if they have a criminal background, because you can look everything up online these days, leadership is empowered to step in and be like, hey, to create a more inclusive and supportive environment for individuals like that. So I do think having the leadership on board is vital to doing any of these efforts. And if they're not already, like you said, one way to do that is look at some of the evidence and research that's out there to help make the case for tapping into this, I guess, this workforce or this untapped talent pool. And there's a book out there, Untapped Talent by that speaks to this. So it's a whole book too that can help people get on board. I would also, I think, looking at, the human resources policies the company has in place. So making sure you're not prohibiting people with certain crimes or convictions that are unrelated to the job at hand. So
Right.
I know, right, for instance, so opening up, not having like a blanket policy that's saying so like Joe, you were mentioning, you have employees from everything from like administrative to manufacturing so if you create a blanket policy statement that's, says oh, anybody with a money laundering, conviction can't work here. Well, that might not apply to someone who's, who's maybe in a manufacturing line, right? Maybe that applies to somebody who's working in accounting and finance. So making sure you don't have blanket policies that exclude people with certain convictions would be, is really imperative. So, and sometimes these policies were created years ago and just no one ever questioned, decades later, no one's questioning them or saying, how can we be more inclusive? So can we do a more individualized case-by-case assessment instead of having these blanket policies? And certainly I think, engaging with you and organizations like Farming2Freedom to find out okay, where can I start?
I think that the real challenge that businesses have today, I mean, there's many, but I think one of the things is you have to be willing to have a different mindset than perhaps you had even, before COVID, especially when it comes to how are you going to fill the roles for all of the jobs that are in your business today. Mm-hmm. I travel around. I'm very fortunate. I travel around a great deal and talk to a number of employers. Doesn't matter the size or the type. And when I ask them, what's your number one concern getting ready to go into 24, I would say that 90% of the time people say to me, I don't know whether or not I'm going to be able to staff properly for the demands that are placed on my business. Mm-hmm. We work with a large industrial / manufacturing business is a client of ours in information security. And, just decided to, collect some information from them. And that is absolutely their number one concern, because what they do is not in any less demand in 24 than it was in 23. Their compliance issues around health and safety, the environment, government contracting, et cetera, are getting more and more steep. And so they're sitting back and saying, listen, if my operator requirement for field work was 2,000 last year, I know based on where we are in the business, I'm going to need 2,200 in 24. And where's that delta going to come from? Even if they can retain the first 2,000, right? And so I think when I take a look at the number of men and women that are in, and we've just kind of tapped on the state prison system. We haven't even talked about the county jail system in Pennsylvania. That in and of itself is another challenge. And so there's just I think what you have to do is you've got to be able to just build a coalition of people that says, listen, there's no 100% right answer. There's got to be an answer where we start somewhere. I think that was the mentality that I had when I started Farming to Freedom. And then to say, listen, we know that we're going to have some failures along the way. We know that we'll never get recidivism to zero. But even with all that said, you got to do something. Like you can't sit on the sidelines and Monday morning quarterback and all that. Like you got to take action and you got to do something, right? And that was, that was the sense that I got from you when we met the first time, to say that, this person is looking at this from the perspective of, I want you to at least explain to these guys how they can start their own business.
Right.
Pretty fascinating. If you ever have the opportunity to work with somebody who is formerly incarcerated, and then they get the opportunity to start their own business and run their own business and see that, it's a pretty incredible experience, because you would have no idea at all that they were that they had a record unless they share that with you. The amount of tenacity, kind of the grit mentality, sacrifice, get it. I mean, they have an entrepreneurial spirit that's pretty positive. And it's pretty fascinating to watch them kind of, take it and run with it. So let me ask you this, from your perspective and your experience in advocacy and the work that you've done personally, what about the topic, whether it's criminal justice reform or fair chance employment, or anything in that entire realm, what interests you the most and why?
That is a great question. What interests me the most and why when it comes to, I think so many components. Definitely addressing like our criminal legal, like doing criminal legal system reform, because our economy and society and cultures are evolving, and a lot of our policies, regulations are not keeping pace. And so reforming them and evolving them to keep pace with time is really important. And I do enjoy doing the advocacy work, because that is hopefully helping like systemic change at like at a broad scale. So like, how can we impact the system to create a change in the better for lots of people, but also with the individuals, like you were saying, like that. I love working with that populate, like the programs we were doing, they were so fulfilling, because like you were saying, it's like that grit and tenacity, it's contagious. And so I'd always leave our classes like feeling so excited, and being able to like take on the world and what can we do next. So I think working with the individuals, and then also another thing that I think that really excites me that I'd like to get into more is why institutions like our prisons and jails are designed the way they are, of being these like, not why, I mean, I know why, but why can't we incorporate more like natural elements, like having plants and greenery? Like I do really appreciate going into some of the facilities and seeing like the beautiful murals that have been done by, the residents there, but also like, let's have plants. And, I like to see that some of the facilities have the dog programs, but I would like to see the way we design those places also change.
I think that is a core element of the stigma that's associated with people that are in jail. It was amazing to me to take a look at the literature when I was working on my PhD. And I won't get the numbers right, but you'll get the frame of reference. So in 1974, in the United States, we had maybe 300,000 people in prison. Today, it's 2 million. So as my granddaughter would say, Poppy, does that mean people are not gooder?
Mhm.
No, honey, it doesn't mean that they're not good. Or it means, to your point, policy has changed. You
Mhm.
know, we've had and I'm not pointing the finger at any particular party. That's not what this is about.
Right.
What it's about is there is a reality that says, okay, 1974, you got 300,000, 2022, 2023, you got 2 million, something's different.
Mhm.
Um, and then to talk about the stigma that goes along with it when I work with men and women both, is to say, listen, your time to really square yourself away is while you're in here, and whether you're going to do your own programming or you're going to be involved in Farming to Freedom's programming. But
Mhm.
now is the time, because when you get out, if you don't think that people on the outside know exactly what's up because of Facebook and everything else, you're sadly mistaken.
Yeah.
And by the way, if they don't know what's up, they're going to make it up. Okay, let's talk
Mhm.
about that. There's that reality. Um, and so my point is that there's a lot of work when you start talking about policy reform. I remember when Gene Barr was president of the
Mhm.
Pennsylvania Chamber, and really started getting involved with Meek Mill and others in the reform movement.
Yeah.
And I remember um, talking to Gene and finding out, now I believe this has been resolved. When you start talking about that policy issue,
Mhm.
told men in state prison, hey, one of the things you should become a barber. Like, you should be a barber. And then when they get
Mhm.
out, they find out that they can't get a barber's license in Pennsylvania if you have a felony on your record.
Yeah.
That's a huge disconnect, right? And that's
Mhm.
not meant to beat up anybody at the DOC, and people are watching this like, oh my gosh, Joe Harford, you're a hater. No,
Yeah.
that's not enough. That
Yeah.
is the reality of policies that are not up to date. They're not,
Mhm.
and again, and I've said this to people before. I'm not an advocate of simply opening up the gates and letting everybody out and sing kumbaya and hope it's going to be okay. At the end of
Mhm.
the day, if you break the law, there's a consequence for that. We can we
Mhm.
can we can discuss sentencing at
Right.
another time, right? But at the end of the day, you break the law and you get caught, you got a consequence. Okay. Well,
Mhm.
where the system kind of breaks down is they're really
Mhm.
good at delivering the consequence,
Mhm.
but again, no offense, they kind of suck when it turns into what are we going to do for rehabilitation and transformation?
Right. Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I mean, that's the history, like, of our prison systems, of the, I guess the goal, right, was like punishment, deterrence, rehabilitation. And so yeah, have the punishment down and serve your time if you if you commit a crime. But right, we're not, while people are incarcerated, then how are we helping, like, encourage deterrence? How are we helping rehabilitate them? And we clearly, from the recidivism rates, it's like, are we doing that? Um, and so, and there's research out there shows that if people participate in educational and vocational programs while they're incarcerated, not only does their recidivism rates go down, but they're much more likely to obtain employment post release. So those programs have been found to be effective. And but yeah, the policies really have to change. And it's, yeah, funny you mentioned the, like, with Gene Barr and Meek Mills, because just last week, the Shapiro administration did pass two bills.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, the Senate Bill 838, which was the probation reform, and then also expanding the clean slate law. So hope,
Mhm.
two. So we are. I do, like, give kudos to the, to the administration, and that we're helping. We are at least attempting to move the needle when it comes to criminal legal
Well,
reform.
go ahead.
Well, just something you said earlier of, like, there was this phrase, or someone, I'm going to be paraphrasing it, but I was at a second chance event in North Carolina, and one of the speakers had said, it's not a left-wing issue. It's not a right-wing issue, because a single wing bird doesn't get anywhere. So you just keep going around in circles. And I, I like that it takes everybody.
Ditto. I was going to say something very similar to that. Because you take a look at, I watched the announcement last week of Senate Bill 838, I believe.
Mhm.
And, you have Josh Shapiro and a number of Democrats. You've got Lisa Baker, who's leading on the Republican side.
Mhm.
And when I've had conversations in Harrisburg with folks, I purposely do this because I'm kind of crazy. I try to find the most extreme person on either side of the aisle to have this conversation with,
Mhm.
whether ultra conservative or ultra liberal, and they all have the same attitude, which is, you're right, we have to do something to solve this problem.
Mhm.
Now, their methodology for solving it may be light years apart, but there is a
Sure.
common feeling that, yes, we have to do something about it.
Right.
And again, I think that's what speaks to nonprofits that are across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and across
Yeah.
the United States. That's what speaks to the work being done by those super cool people at Reform Alliance,
Yeah.
and others. Because here is the reality. The reality is we are not making enough humans to deal with the workforce crisis in the United States for the foreseeable future.
Mhm.
That's a data point.
Mhm.
We are not doing anything constructively to really deal with, and I'll use that real hot topic, for immigrants. Okay. So we've got this population of men and women locked up that have the propensity to help, not
Mhm.
solve,
Mhm.
but help with the workforce gap.
Mhm.
And if we don't at least take it from a conversation that you and I are having to things like policy reform, rehabilitative services delivered on the inside of jail and or state
Mhm.
prison, wraparound social services upon release, what we call it Farming to Freedom, being able to institute a life caddy to help someone beyond the typical 90 to 120 days of services.
Mhm.
And then if we don't also realize that, by the way, and I don't know the exact number, but there is a percentage of men and women that are released from prison that are destined to be entrepreneurs. They,
Hmm.
they're, and I can't remember what that number is. So if
Mhm.
we don't then have another area of focus, which is, okay, how do we get them the business support that they need? How do we help them identify lenders of last resort, et cetera, and
Right.
so forth? We miss out on an opportunity to help solve the problem. I mean,
Yeah.
I think fair chance employment is one of those solutions. I
Mhm.
think there are many, but it's got to be multiple conversations that people like you and I are having. I own and run a business, and people often ask me like, what are you doing? Um,
Mhm.
I was fortunate. I became aware of what I consider to be the number 2 or number 3 societal issue of the 21st century. And I'm looking at a lot of data and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me. So what can we do
Mhm.
to fix it? And my attitude has always been, if we can keep one person from going
Right.
back to jail, that's a $44,000 a year bill, and
Right.
we can turn them into a $44,000 a year taxpayer. I
Right.
like when people pay taxes. I know
Yeah.
that sounds kind of crazy, but I like when people pay taxes.
Mhm.
And for someone in your position as a professional who's saying, okay, this is part of my career path, as well as my own personal desire and what you want to do long term. I think that's how we solve the problem. You've got to
Mhm.
have individuals on both sides of the aisle from
Right.
a number of different constituencies that basically come together and want to take action. I don't want
Mhm.
to go to another meeting, listen to another group of people pontificate. I already know what the issues are, but I'm
Mhm.
interested in working with people that want to really put boots on the ground and take action.
Mhm. Yeah. And what's kind of like beautiful about this like conversation and interaction is that you and I had met years ago. At the time I was working at the state and you had your business, and since then I've gone into private sector. You've started Farming to Freedom, a nonprofit. And so like the government and changing policy is necessary, but it does take like cross sector collaboration. So it's going to take nonprofits like Farming to Freedom. It takes private sector because we have to be providing employment opportunities, and it takes government. So it's really great to like kind of come full circle and like be in different areas. And
Yeah.
that all of those components are necessary to really address this,
Oh,
societal
sure.
issue.
I don't think that there's one size that fits all. I
Yeah.
don't think there's, one particular part of the government that's going to solve it. What I have found that's been the most rewarding for me is there is a woman that I work with. About 5 days ago, she celebrated her 1 year anniversary of being released from county jail.
Nice.
And she's done the work. She's transformed her life. She's become a certified recovery specialist. She has a full-time job working in a female halfway house.
Wow.
She's reuniting with her daughter. Just spent the last couple weeks with her dad. And so for me, that's the reason why. When people say, like, why do you do this? It's because of that woman. It's because of Kelly. Because,
Yeah.
my job, your job, is not to give people all the answers. It's to create kind of those guide rails on how do we set them up for success. We give them the necessary work that they've got to do. They've got to commit to it. They got to go through the blood, sweat, and tears, right? And to be kind of like, to me, it's whether you want to call it a coach or a life caddy or whatever, but just be there and also understand that there is a degree of accountability that you've got to hold people's feet to the fire. I've had just as many successes as failures in regard to repeat offenders that have gone through the program, and they just kind of they cycle themselves through. And I learned from a guy in Texas. He was in prison for 32 years.
Wow.
And, he finally decided to get involved in rehabilitation. And I said, like, what was the trigger for you? Like, why did you, 32 years, dude? Like, what's up with that? And he said, Joe, until you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, it's never going to change. It's kind of like anything else. I mean, we're getting ready to go into New Year's, and people are going like, oh my gosh, I'm going to join the gym, and I'm going to lose 15 pounds, and I'm going to stop drinking, and all that kind of. But you know what? Until you finally get to that place, whether you're incarcerated or not, where you're
Right.
ready to do the work,
Right.
it's not going to happen. It's just not.
Yeah. Yeah. And going off that, or kind of in alignment with it is, there's so much, the internal motivation that is hard. I know I make goals for, being more healthy every new year as well. But you need the external support too. And that's like the Farming to Freedom, that support system. So when individuals get out, it's having that's external support and motivation is really important too. So
yeah, for
yes,
sure.
we all have our own, accountability, and we do have to be in the mindset to want to make the change, to commit, but it's having that external support, and the support systems is really helpful too.
So anything that you want to wrap up with before we close this thing out today?
I made a couple notes, so I want to see if there's any other little nuggets of information that I want to highlight. I guess it's just, the conversation's been so great, and I'm glad to reconnect and kind of come full circle and doing different things, and encourage anyone too listening to, like, if you're thinking about where to start, it's like reaching out and having a conversation with Joe or I think it is important for businesses to, for the private sector to also advocate. So like to get engaged with like policy reform, to speak up and help other businesses kind of come along and become a little more, progressive when it comes to engaging with people that have been previously incarcerated. And I do think, I guess one more thought is that, it is becoming an expectation now. Like employers, customers are expecting businesses more and more to like have, societal impacts for the better, to like help address some societal issues. So I'm hoping that will kind of like naturally guide the market too. So, it'll just be like, of course, everybody's hiring, people on the fringes of the workforce. We don't have to be having these conversations that are like, how do we get more companies and businesses to hire these people? And it just is like it's a normal practice.
Yeah, it can become normalized. I think that in order for that to happen, you've got to be able to really work at those positive examples. I say that to the guys I work with all the time, because I've reached out to a number of folks in the community to start to build the volunteer base. We've got some folks that are going to be coming into jail with me on Fridays to meet with the guys. And really what it comes down to is you've got to sell the program just like I do.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to, a lot of them will turn around and say, hey, can you help me find a job? And my answer is, sure, I can help you find a job,
Mm-hmm.
but you got to keep the job. I'm happy to help you. I'm happy
Mm-hmm.
to help you with your resume. I'm happy to help you practice
Mm-hmm.
interviewing. If you need a ride to your job interview, I'm happy to do it, but you're the one who's got to keep the job.
Mm-hmm.
And so making sure that, all of those basics that you and I take for granted, show up early, stay late, be professional, et cetera, and so forth. A lot of times this is where the coaching comes in, and the support that they need is really necessary. But
Yeah,
you know
it's good.
what? I said this to my wife not too long ago, and she obviously thinks I'm crazy too, which is fine. I turned 57 in October. And so, I have 43 years left to take the national recidivism rate and cut it in half. And that's the big, hairy,
Ambitious.
audacious goal, right?
Yeah.
So if we can, and I'm willing to start at 60, if you're willing to start at 60 with me,
Yeah.
and take that to 30 in 47 years. And again, I said that to somebody in a presentation, like, oh my gosh, that's impossible. You're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? We put people on the moon. We can cut the recidivism rate in half in 47 years, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank
Want to
you.
wish you and your family a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
You
And
too.
I really do appreciate it, Shea. This has
Yeah.
been cool.
I appreciate it as well. Thanks, Joe. It was good to catch up. And I'll send a list of resources. If anybody is watching, I have a great list of credible resources that can help make
That'll
the
be
case.
great. Thanks, Shea.
Thanks.